Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining this lunchtime encouragement and update. I've been trying to figure out some different people, maybe because you're tired of hearing my voice all the time. So trying to finagle some of my friends to come on and join me that I think has something good to say. So Dave, you're the one that I'm finagling today. This is my friend, Dave Runyon. Dave, you want to talk a little bit? We've known each other for, I don't know, man, 20
20
years.
years. It's been
Yeah.
20 years. Yeah.
You want to say, just introduce yourself a little bit, tell people who you are and what you're about, what you're doing.
Sure. Well, it's great to be here with my friend of 20 years. That
20
is
years.
very strange to
You're so
say.
old, dude. You're so old.
We are old, and yet we have not changed a lot. There's
Right.
not been a lot of personal growth for you and I. So no, that's not true at all. But yeah, I mean, when we met, I was a high school teacher and had just started dating my wife, I think, when we first met. And
Yeah.
so then I ended up as a pastor for about 10 years here in the city. And the last 10 years, I've been running this nonprofit where we help faith and government and business leaders work together. And there's been a lot of cool stuff that's come out of that. Simplest way to explain it is I help uh, leaders become friends and then figure out how to work together, mostly around issues with the poor in the city. And so it's put me in a lot of fun rooms and a lot of great spaces with different people, mostly around the Denver metro area.
So I can't imagine that in our current moment doing that stuff, trying to figure out faith and business and government leaders, and particularly leveraging what we have to love and serve the most vulnerable. That this has probably been an interesting time for you. What's your perspective? And maybe just a broad question, what's your perspective in this moment? How can we help us to see maybe some things through your eyes that maybe we haven't been seeing through our eyes?
Yeah, I think I've just been reminded that relationships really matter. And so when you get into crisis, a lot of leaders, it's lonely leading. And the value of having friendships with people in other organizations, not just your own silo, I've been really noticing how important that is lately. And so, and I've just been thinking about our local government leaders, city managers, police chiefs, everybody all the way up to the governor, and just to think about what this must be like to be in their shoes. Whatever training that they got, I don't know what school you go to be a government leader, but whatever school that is, it doesn't teach you this. And so I just think that it's really important for us to have grace and to figure out ways to support and to be curious about how we can help with the people that God's put in authority.
And I think that's so good. I think we hold other people to a standard that we would never want to be held to, right? Like, hey, you have to be really good at this thing that you've never been trained for
Right.
and no one's ever done before, but we want you to be good at it and please everybody, right? And like,
Yeah.
and there's no black and white. Everything's gray, and so everything is living in tension. And yeah, so folks, pray for and support. Reach out to your city council people.
Sure.
Those people that are really struggling. I was struck with, even the idea of sales tax, right, for Lakewood. Like, man, so now our city is trying to figure out how we're going to continue to do what we're supposed to do with this finances that are not at all like we thought they were going to do, and the pressure that carries just in itself, and then to try and navigate a city or a country, a state through these unknown times is a crazy thing. So.
Yeah. Really, oh, it's crazy. I saw the other day the governor did an executive order and cut, over $250 million out of the budget because they're in crisis too, just like a lot of businesses are, just like a lot of churches are. We're all trying to figure out, how do we navigate this? What's the best way forward, and what's the best way to do it responsibly?
Yeah, totally. Dave, you wrote a book called The Art of Neighboring that's been, how long ago was that?
8 years. Well, the book came out 8 years ago. Kind of
Okay.
what laid the foundation for the book happened over 10 years ago.
Yeah, in Arvada. That's when actually Westwoods was in Arvada, kind of at the beginning of that part, and then we're just like, we're out of here. We're going down south.
Westwoods Elementary School. That's right. Way back in the day.
So I think one of the things we were talking about right before we started was, man, I think if we've gone through all this difficulty and and all this pain and all this fear, all this moment, and we don't grow out of it, or we don't see fruit in our lives, just feels like such a waste to me. And I think this idea of pressing into what it means to be a neighbor, to I think for us, one of the things that we're trying to communicate more and more and more as much as we can is that we're the church, that the building isn't the church, or the specific time on Sunday morning isn't the church. We're the church. And so we
Yeah.
have this great opportunity to kind of do like because the ships have burned, like we can't say the Sunday morning program is the church, because we can't do that anymore. And I think what I hope that it's done is that people can use their hospitality gift for something more than helping pass out programs once a month, right? That they can actually go, oh, I have this spiritual gift to make an impact in my community. And so I think even that term personal ministry, has to do so much with what it means to be a follower of Jesus in a neighborhood, and to love your neighbors well. So maybe from your perspective, as we look at this at our current moment, what are some opportunities that we have to love and serve our neighbors in ways that maybe we haven't ever been before? Have you seen some things like that?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. The amount of loneliness and
Mm.
social isolation that we're experiencing as a country, as a culture, as a world has been really well documented. So people don't have face-to-face interactions at work right now. They don't have them at church. They don't have them at school. But yet you go around your neighborhood and you're seeing more people out than ever. And this is a moment for us to really like rediscover a theology of place, and to be thinking, okay, what does it look like for me to connect with the people that live closest to me? What does it look like to be the kind of person that leans in a little bit? And just, it's simple stuff. It's like, hey, I don't know their name, or I forgot their name, and I'm just going to like use this as a moment to connect and remember that. Or to look at somebody and to go, hey, how's this impacting your job? That's something you could be taking a walk, and instead of just waving or saying, hey, Bob, you could actually just stop and just go, hey, what's this been like for you? Or what's the stay-at-home kid school thing? How do you have any parents that you're concerned about? Like, there are so many great opportunities to just get a little bit below the surface with people, and to talk about things of the heart, things that actually matter. And all over the place, everybody's open to it. I mean, this incredible, there's so many different silver linings that exist right now because of this pandemic and because of this crisis that we're in. And I think we'd be really wise to start thinking through, how do we want to do that? What does it look like for us to be catalysts in the places that we live and to connect with people? And so, my neighborhood, me, Rick, I'm a raging extrovert. This whole thing has been brutal for me. One of the most life-giving things has been just grabbing lawn chairs. So we just do these little sit-ins. And so a bunch of the neighbors, we just grab lawn chairs. Everybody brings their own drink. We go down, and as couples, we're sitting, in 10 feet apart from each other, or, if you're a couple, you can sit next to each other. If you're single, just sitting 10 feet apart from everybody and just hanging out for an hour and just talking. And it's been some of the richest conversation I've had, because we're all just sitting there shaking our heads going, what in the world's going on? And just being able to have a sounding board to process some of the uncertainty. And so that's been a gift in my own neighborhood. It's been a great time to check in with a lot of my older neighbors who may or may not have family around. My experience has been that most of my older neighbors have been like, hey, we're good. We've got it figured out of how we want to do the grocery store, stuff like that. But just calling them and just saying, you can just tell the appetite for connection is really, really high. And so even if your neighbors don't ask you for anything, just the fact that you reach out is a really big deal. Lauren, my wife's been doing some, happy hour Zoom calls with some of the neighbors, just so they can all vent about, which ones of their kids are they're most frustrated with that day. And, there's just been so many opportunities to talk about things that really matter. And all it really takes is being visible and being interruptible. Like if you're visible out there in the front, if you aren't just like in a hurry looking like you have someplace that you'd rather be, you'd be shocked at how much stuff will come your way.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think some of those big barriers, and I'd love you to talk through maybe some of those barriers that typically prevent us from doing that stuff, are just gone, or at least maybe not barriers, maybe excuses, right?
Right.
I'm too busy. I'm in a hurry. I have something every night. So to be able to actually connect with my neighbors, and I think even at church, I think having no church programming at night, it's so crazy. that has actually allowed people to step into a space to love and serve their neighbors well. And actually maybe some of the activities at church have prevented people from loving their neighbors, which just sounds so weird. It's one of the things that Jesus talks most about, or at least is most central to his ministry, right? So what are some other barriers when you think about that are gone in this moment, or maybe some barriers that exist that we have to kind of take a deep breath and step into with courage instead of, wussing out and running back home? So
Yeah, the biggest one that's been lowered is the one you just said. It's time.
yeah.
Is that, when you're driving your kids to a practice every single night or a game or whatever it is, and when your whole world is just jammed in with activities where you're not, it's hard to be a good neighbor if you're never in your neighborhood. And that was a huge learning lesson for me, is that when I first kind of got struck with this idea and just convicted around the fact that I wasn't very intentional in my own neighbors, it made me confront the number of things that I had filled up my life with so that I just wasn't around. And quite frankly, like, I was tired of living that way and I wanted to get out of some of them. And so it just gave me a good excuse to say no. I'm like, yeah, I'm actually going to start being a decent neighbor. So I can't be on this nonprofit board, or I can't show up to this church activity, or whatever whatever it
Right.
is. And church activities are great. I'm not
Totally.
downplaying that. I think being a part of a small group is really, really important. But to live in a way in which you're interruptible and to live in a way in which you're visible is a huge, huge deal. And so time's the first one, then fear. And I think the fear thing might even be higher now than before. It's not just fear, like I'm going to get, COVID-19 or something like that. The fear around, that person who lives over there, I don't know. They just see, we make all these assumptions because we live in a 24-hour news cycle. We're exposed to like the worst stories every single day, and you just get them all the time on TV. And so then when somebody moves in and they're different than you, it's easy to make assumptions. It's easy to jump to some conclusions that may not be true. And so my experience has been, and here's what's hard. There's a lot of broken people that are out there. So there might be something really unhealthy going on. But my experience has been, the more I lean towards people, the more I discover, oh, okay, that turns out that person's just really shy. And all it took was for me to reach out and engage them. And so I would just encourage people, overcoming those, the obstacles of time and of fear. Those are the two biggest ones when it comes to starting to meet the people who live right around you.
Totally. And I think going back to what you said earlier, there's so much that we have in common right now, way more we have in common right now that's like rise to the surface than things that separate us. Cause
Yeah,
man, everyone's going through the same, and really worldwide, right? Some of that commonality that everyone's walking with right now is huge to kind of press into. That's for sure. I think the willingness to step in and have those conversations that just start at a different level, that isn't like, there's no baseball to talk about. There's no football to talk about. Very much.
yeah.
Kind
Yeah,
of,
like 90% of my conversations are, the content from my conversations are gone. I have to talk about real things now, because I don't just talk about my unhealthy obsession with sports. Yeah.
yeah, and ultimately one of the things that I've realized personally is a lot of the unhealthy ways that I kept score of how my life was doing are gone. Like those, the idea of am I accomplishing a lot at work, or is this certain thing happening or that certain thing happening? And I think when we press back into what is a successful life, really, what does it mean to be a successful Jesus follower? Those things are still there. Like, am I growing in my love for God every day and understanding his love for me? And am I growing in the way that I love my neighbor? And so some of that we can be real tangible with, of like, I think one of the best lines that you had initially was, it's hard to love your neighbor if you don't know their name. So yeah,
Yeah,
the way that sometimes I think we prioritize little things and then these big things like loving your neighbor come on the sidelines is tragic. And I think this gives us an opportunity to kind of pull back some of those layers and actually look and say, how am I doing it? What it means to follow Jesus? Am I feeling full and soaking in his love for me and returning that? And then is that extending to the way that I love people, even people that are different than me, is a
for
really
sure.
tangible way that we can step forward. So,
Yeah, for sure.
well, any final words, anything that you feel like, oh man, if we can't talk about neighboring unless we talk about this before we go, or any kind of final thoughts that you have about us navigating as Jesus followers this moment and the opportunity that it has, or yeah, any final things that you have for us?
Yeah, I think I would just say this. This is what's most encouraging, and there's a lot of very hard things, especially for churches and faith communities during this time. And so I don't want to diminish any of those, but I will say this. What we're seeing right now is something that's really potent and really beautiful with the church, and that the church as a whole is exercising a lot of muscles that have been atrophied for a long time. And I'm watching what Westwoods is doing and several of the other faith communities around the city and around the state, and I just see something so good happening inside of the church as they've been able to in some ways say, okay, um, this way that we have spent a lot of our time and energy, that doesn't make sense right now for the safety of others. And so how do I want to rearrange people's time and energy to go and to be the church in different ways? And so it's just been so encouraging to see this happen. And so this disruption that's gone on, I hope and I pray, and I know that Rick, you're one of the leaders that'll do this, is that we don't just rush right back into, I just got to get back to, got to get back on the same, rat race, on the same little hamster wheel. I hope we can kind of step back and go, okay, good, what did we experience here that we want to take into the expression of the way that we're doing church long beyond this? And so it's going to be exciting to see what happens as a result. I'm excited to see what Westwoods does and what that looks for you guys.
Me too. I think that early on, I just got this picture. It does feel like the people of Israel being pulled out of slavery in Egypt. I think that for us, that for me personally, that was true. Like to recognize, oh, I really had become a slave to some of this stuff that I just allowed to kind of filter in and pack into my schedule. And that willingness to go, oh, I'm free from that. But then to feel like you were talking about the pull of like the people of Israel, like, oh, we just want to go back to Egypt. Can we just go back to Egypt? And then the willingness for us to be in the wilderness right now, that requires us every day to look for where the cloud's moving. Like, where's God moving today? And I'm just going to follow him and trust that if I do that in enough days in a row, that I'm going to end up where he wants me to, where he wants me to be at the end of each day. And so what I think personally, it's important for us to do that. And which has to do with, like you said, being interruptible. Like, God, oh, here's where God's moving me today. He's leading me into a conversation with my neighbor because I have to borrow a lawnmower, or because we're both out at the same time, or whatever that looks like. And then trust that the fruit of the promised land of living fully in the presence of God will be completed as we continue to walk into that. So it's really, really good.
Awesome. Well, I love being on here. Let's do it again.
Thanks, man. Love you. Thanks for sharing. Talk to you soon.
You too,
Bye.
Rick.